We're excited to announce the first ever, first of its kind higher education podcast conference brought to you by Edu Alliance, the EdUp Experience, and Podium. This is happening Saturday, July 12th at the University of Illinois Chicago campus. This is an in-person event, one day only, the first of its kind. This is for people working in and around higher education who are interested in starting a podcast, who may have a podcast, want to learn more about podcasting. So if you want to be there, please go to higheredpodcon.com. That's higheredpodcon.com to learn how you can get your early bird registration, see who the keynote will be, and how you can submit proposals to be a part of this amazing inaugural conference. So that, again, go to higheredpodcon.com to learn more.
Welcome back, everybody. It's your time to EdUp on the EdUp Experience podcast, where we make education your business. I've said that a lot of different ways, but the message is the same, where we make education your business. And there's no greater time in higher education to make it your business. I was going to say higher education again, but that would have been many times in the same sentence. To make our business your business, right? We still serve students amidst the disruption that we see in higher education. There's still a focus that we must have, which is to change the lives of people who are looking for education. And we bring amazing, trailblazing leadership voices to this podcast and put you in, have these people literally talk to your earballs, if you will, and tell you what's happening at their campuses in and around them. I also want to remind you all, in addition to the podcast, and I know I've said this many times, but not anybody's taking advantage of it, even though we provide the service. We took a website. We took a part of our website and we turned it into EdUp editorials, where we are publishing articles that our colleagues across higher education want to write about things happening on, around, or about campuses of higher education that maybe a trade publication doesn't want because there isn't an angle. Maybe it's about a new program launch that's significant. Maybe it's about an economic impact. Maybe it's about a leadership philosophy that a college president has. Write up the article, submit it to us, and you can submit it to us wherever you can find us, me, Elvin, or to EdUp at edupexperience.com. We don't make it too difficult. We review it, we publish it, we get you a link, and we promote it to our global podcast audience. So get your pen out, dating myself, get your paper out, write something down, tell us a good story happening on your campus. Okay, now that I got all that out of the way, I've been waiting for this guest to come on ever since I met her in Puerto Rico. I think it was in Puerto Rico, introduced through a mutual contact of one of the SUNY presidents, which was my alma mater, where I got my baccalaureate degree. And so it was serendipitous to meet this person as a friend of the president of my alma mater, and she's doing incredible work in the space. Ladies and gentlemen, she's Dr. Donna Hodge. She is president at Fitchburg State University. Donna, welcome to an EdUp Mike. How are you?
Oh, Joe, I'm doing great. Thank you. That was a great introduction. I'm hyped already.
Oh, my goodness. Watch out. I know you have a lot of energy, which I love, because I think as a college president, you got to have the energy, because you're getting smacked around from all angles and all different kinds of people. But you have students.
It's true. It's 24/7, right? Yeah.
Yep. But you have students still. And that is still the focus. Mm-hmm. So first, level set for the audience, and then we'll talk about all the stakeholders. What do you do at Fitchburg State University? Who do you serve? How do you serve them?
Fitchburg State University is a state public in Massachusetts, so a very crowded higher ed marketplace here in New England. We are 130 years old. Our real claim to fame has always been our teacher ed program, our nursing program, those things that you would expect from a former normal school. Today, I think we're claiming space in unusual areas. We're rethinking engineering tech. We're rethinking game design. Our communication studies programs are doing innovative things. And just recently, we relaunched some really collaborative programs in creative arts therapies. So really thinking about the ways that people interact and create art and how that drives us as humans and how that changes society. So some really interesting things happening at Fitchburg State. I think that's the power of our state public institutions that are this size. We can be agile. We are not as burdened with bureaucracy as some of our larger sister institutions. So when those opportunities come, we want to move. And that's doubly true. That's doubly true when it comes to the things that we can do to support our community. So we're very invested in this region too. So North Central Massachusetts is home.
You're so right that you're in a dense higher education area, right? I mean, It is dense. And among that denseness, I'm not sure if denseness is a word. I'll have to look it up.
Blessed. Denseness is now a word.
It is today here on the Edip Experience podcast. There's kind of two things happening simultaneously. One, competition for students, and two, declining enrollment for many institutions. Like this happening at the same time. Enrollment's going down, but we need more of them. There's tuition dependencies, even among state institutions that have funding. Still got to have students, still have to increase revenue. It's a tough balance right now. Donna, how do you rationalize that? How do you work with your leadership team to work through some of the struggles that we're going through right now in higher ed?
Well, first, I think it's a philosophy, right? I didn't get hired to manage a decline. I didn't get hired to think about fewer students. I got hired to start dreaming up a future and to push a campus and to support a campus and to get creative. So that's designing a future. That is a very different sort of approach than managing decline. So that's every day. So, that's the way we approach everything with our leadership team. It's like we can keep talking about declines. If we believe the data, which just says fewer and fewer students are going to seek college as their next step, then what are we even doing here? I don't believe in that. I think more and more people are going to need what it is we have to offer, and we got to be ready for them. And they're not necessarily coming with the same mindset that you or I had when we graduated high school. And in fact, there's more and more adult learners, and they need a different pathway onto our campus. So in my mind, it's not about declines. It's about designing. And what is it we're designing? What is the outcome we want? And it's not just about numbers. It's about educating humans. And I think that's one of the ways we're going to all start getting more creative about what a degree actually means and what is it we value. Do we value the degree or do we value the education? Because the way you prioritize those two potential outcomes changes how you go about managing a decline or designing a future.
That's a fact. That's a fact.
I love what you said about mindset. Right? Because you're talking about mindset. I didn't come in here to manage decline. I came in here to dream big. Like, where do we take this institution? Because I have seen personally, because I stepped out of an institution very recently, but how the media and what's being reported can change our mindset. And not to say that we become excuse driven, but that we can use what's happening out there to say, well, external factors are really, making this not go as I planned. And instead of thinking around it, we accept it. And that can, so mindset really matters in this day and age.
We've been talking a lot about anticipatory obedience, right? As new information comes from the federal government. Definitely not my phrase, but one, our legal counsel has said a lot. Things you see this quoted in Wall Street Journal, even while we're talking about healthcare and higher ed and all of these things. So anticipatory obedience, we're trying really hard not to embrace that particular mindset in this moment, and instead keep a focus on what is our mission. And it really is, if in this moment you just accept that there are external forces outside of your control and it's just going to be what it's going to be, then why are we all here? What is it we all get up for? What is our why? And I think that's a question my leadership team is asking themselves every single day, because the news from Washington is a little bit overwhelming, and it doesn't really matter politically what you think about anything in this moment. The amount of information coming from DC has never been as overwhelming as it really is right now. So what do we do with all of that information? I think as good academics, we start filtering it, deciding what it is that we can control, what impacts us in this moment. And you have to believe. I mean, the power of education is about believing in transformation and believing that change is possible. We believe that someone can show up on this campus one way and walk off this campus something altogether different. That is the power of education. So we have to be good stewards of that. And it means filtering information, and it means really keeping an eye on the prize. If I believe that it's just going to be what it's going to be, then why am I here? I believe transformation is possible. And I think even in this moment that there is an opportunity to level set the value of higher education and to tell our story in a very, very different way. And I think maybe to interrogate our own beliefs in new ways. What is it as college and university presidents that we really do believe? Is it education or is it just degree? Because our belief in what a degree is or can be has radically changed in the last 50 years. So are we prepared for what our workforce needs, what good, well-prepared citizens need to be able to navigate a complete barrage of information, a workforce that is changing more rapidly than any of us can even keep a handle on. So higher ed can help drive that conversation, or we can be passive receivers. And I'm very committed to us driving that conversation, not just passively receiving whatever we think the status quo might be today. We can change that. That's 100%. The power of higher ed.
I'm just imagining the person that comes into you and your leadership team and says, I have this giant set of problems, and you're going, okay, give me the solutions with those. Right? I mean, like I can tell you're wired that way.
Well, I got a lot of problems. The number of people who are willing to start talking about how we're going to solve them, that's a different thing altogether too. So no, it's true. Being really curious, listening fast, and then empowering people to make some bold decisions. I think we've known the things that we needed to refine and rethink in higher ed for a long time. But it's become a shorter time period for any administrator to stay in a role, which means administrators make decisions and they don't have to reckon with the outcome of those decisions, right? So you're making decisions today that this campus will be dealing with in 10 years or 20 years. It's value engineering a new building, right?
Right.
If you're not going to live in that building, then you can make a shortcut right over here. You can save a buck or two. And the reality is that's not how long-term success works. You have to plan for a long-term future. And when you have a revolving door of leadership, it gets a lot more complicated. So I'd say the big questions on my mind right now, it's like, how do we empower leaders to stay, to commit to campuses, to commit to a mission? That's not just presidents, that's an entire leadership team. The more stability we can give a campus, the more accountable we can hold our administrators, and the bigger and bolder we can make those dreams of what that future is going to look like, what that future we're designing is actually going to be for students.
Bullseye.
Hit it. You hit it. Because it can't be one person, it's a team. And that team does have to mesh and stay together in order to really scale impact. And you mentioned one of those ways at Fitchburg State is, you said adult students, right? Adult students are coming in greater numbers, and they expect a different path, maybe even a different experience. And that is one of the areas that we have been talking about in higher education for a long time. And many campuses can't engineer themselves out of what the traditional was, right? Where the adult student wants something at 11 o'clock at night or on a Saturday, and the people on the campus are working 8 to 5. And it's like, okay, wait a minute. We have to change the catalog, and we have to change the policies, and we have to change all these things. And that change can be hard because, and I was just in a room of people yesterday at a conference talking to board members and presidents, and some of the questions that I had were just completely engineered to a first-time, full-time freshman. Just every question came from that perspective, and it's like, well, wait a minute. We were just talking about these other folks, and we're not giving that frame of reference to the adult student who we're recruiting in greater numbers. Can you talk about how you reconcile those things? The tradition, how we think in higher ed, right? Because we still go, oh yeah, freshman. It's almost how we think, but that student might be 42. It's tough.
I think about how much information a graduating high school student has right now at their fingertips. Like,
oh man,
it is so just insane that they get to walk around with computers. They don't, you and I grew up in a time where we asked a dumb question and our parents said, okay, there's no dumb questions. Let's go to the library and we will spend the afternoon figuring out why the sky is blue.
Yeah.
Today, if a young person wants to know or any person, me right now, it's like, hello, why is the sky blue? Right? I can tell you this in just a minute.
You mean you don't go to the encyclopedia? You don't go to the encyclopedias anymore?
Are those even? I don't know. I have the Encyclopedia of the World on my phone.
Yeah.
But the thing that we're struggling now to teach students is how to discern what is accurate, what's fact from fiction, and to understand how you can find the answer to a question like why the sky is blue, and then decide, okay, that's a credible answer. I believe this answer over this answer. And that's true for everything they encounter in the world. And it means that they see the whole world. Those first-time full-time freshmen, they see the world in a whole different way. And I would say even the expectations they come to our campuses with have changed so much just since the pandemic, right? Yeah. They grew up doing high school online. They had an ability to disconnect or reconnect in ways that you and I just could not have imagined. And so if we know all of that is true about our first-time full-time freshmen, then campuses like Fitchburg State public institutions where we serve a first-generation minoritized student population in a region of the state that struggles economically. To live our mission, to serve this region, we have to really think hard about who those students are. And I think the sort of gateway conversation to the bigger conversation about how do you create pathways for adults is to first recognize that the first-time full-time freshman experience has changed completely. It is not the same today as it was yesterday. One of our communications faculty members just pointed out he was part of a huge group of faculty who published a new round of open educational resources as part of a Massachusetts program called Rotel. And the whole idea is about educational justice and equity in the classroom, and how do we get good books in our students' hands at a reasonable cost or no cost, even better. And he was saying that he has to update this book that he really just finished last year because AI has changed communication so much in the last year that this book he just finished has to be updated again. Now, that is a fast-paced higher education marketplace, right? That changes how we market to students. That changes how students think about what they get from us. Yep. But I would say what we've known at state publics like Fitchburg State is that even in the good old days, whatever that was for whoever, right? The good old days, the reality is our students were coming to us 18 years old, first-time freshmen, straight out of a high school experience, and yet they weren't really the traditional student. Right. They are working students. They did not have a support system at home. They may be carrying the load financially for an entire family.
First-gen student, right?
First-gen, absolutely. So the lives they're leading are actually much more like what in 1990 we might have said is an adult student experience, a non-traditional student experience. So I think one of the things that we need to keep talking about in higher ed is to somehow throw off the traditional, non-traditional naming that we do of our student demographics, because I don't think it holds out anymore. I don't think it's that simple, and it's certainly not for state public institutions that have an access mission. So that to me is the gateway conversation, because if our faculty and our librarians, our staff, they know that is true for our students. Our students work. They need financial support from the institution. They need wraparound services. They are food insecure. They are housing insecure. They have worries that are much, much bigger than any of us could always imagine. And so how do we support that whole student experience? They know that about our students. So then when you say, okay, but if you're 42 and you've never been to college and you're also first gen and you're housing insecure, you're food insecure, maybe you're a former military member, you're a veteran, you've lived this whole other life and you're trying to reshape what is possible. What better place to find yourself than a college campus? But the college campus has to be ready for you. So I think that's a pretty good way to start a conversation with a campus. Like, let's talk about the current population of students and what they expect and what they've experienced. And it's not that different from a non-traditional, right, adult learner trying to figure their way out too. And then you can have a much more radical conversation about what services do we need for adults? How do we make, I mean, it's interesting. How do you make an adult learner feel like they belong? How do we make sure that they feel welcome in our spaces? Because at the same time, there is a value in protecting that traditional first-time, full-time freshman college experience where you get the freedom and the grace and the safety to try things and to maybe make a misstep or three.
Yeah.
I love what you're saying. And let me just say this too. Your characterization of, it's almost like we were classifying students by the schedule almost, that they, like some kind of internal term. Now it's the it's the external characteristics of the student that are dictating how they experience higher education, right? Because you could have what looks like an 18-year-old traditional student who has 2 jobs and
has lived on their own for 2 years.
Right. And you're going to think, oh, it's an 18-year-old traditional freshman. Well, no. This person has significant characteristics around them, maybe risk factors, right, that we have to consider from a retention perspective, because we need to watch it. They're just not hanging out in the dorm all day. They're going to class. Maybe they're a commuter student and they're popping in a job, coming to class, popping to the job, coming to class. They lose the job. What happens to the class? So it brings a whole nother perspective. There's a company out there called Education Dynamics, marketing company, and they say that the new learner is a modern learner, that they're dictated by, they're classified by the technology usage almost that they have, right? There's certain levels of technology, but everybody has these new behaviors that we have to consider, right? Because now you're a first-time full-time freshman and you're a 50-year-old student who's coming in on part-time. Both say, it should be easy for me to register for classes. I kind of want it to be easy. I don't want it to be super hard. I really want to, get my grades fast on my phone. I don't want to have to call up and, so all of a sudden it puts the university sort of in a place where we're having to deliver, and I've said this a lot in the podcast, and I know I repeat myself, but our personal lives, our expectations for digital transformation in our personal life, now bringing that to our university, right? Like we like Uber, we like Netflix, we like the skip intro button, we like all these things that are catered to us. And in the university, we've got to bring that to the student. What do you think about all that?
I think that's spot on. I think about how frustrated, I think my husband and I downloaded a new app, to watch some show. And like, why is there a commercial?
Yeah.
I don't have time for a commercial. Get straight to the show.
Well, let's start the insanity.
This is unheard of. Who watches commercials?
I got a 10-year-old daughter. If there's a commercial, you will see a significant meltdown. Like this foreign interruption to the show. What is this? It's crazy.
Your daughter and I are on the same wavelength, because I'm telling you, I'm just like, are you kidding me? Saturday is ruined. Why is there a commercial? All I wanted was to watch.
Me? Oh, I love it.
So
right.
I think that it's true. And so what we're trying to do in higher ed is to eliminate the commercials. Nobody's got time for that. Like I've made a choice as a 50-year-old. I want to come back to school. I've made a choice as an 18-year-old, and I want a college experience. I want to know what day one looks like. And I want to be able to envision, at the end of, year 4 or year 6 or whatever it's going to be. And also maybe I want to imagine that I offboard myself at some point along the way because I just need to, or I want to. I need to do that with some confidence that I can log back in and pick the show up where I left off. The commercial interruptions are a killer. And we do that a lot. It's the bureaucracy of higher ed. We throw in, okay, school is what matters, the degree, the education you're going to get here. Here's 4 steps you've got to go through, including a 2-day orientation to get that thing that we've promised you, which is just access to the education if you are willing to do the work. And so the question is, and this is something my team is dealing with right now, what is it we want to get out of orientation? What is the outcome? What is it going to do for students? And there's a couple of ways I think we kind of landed on just this week is like, okay, if orientation is about student success, then we're already planning for students to fail. So if what we're spending orientation doing is showing them all the interventions and all the ways they can save themselves, then we're assuming that they're going to need it. They need to know where to find it if they need it. They don't necessarily need the pre-planned anticipatory obedience around failure. That's not what we need to provide.
When you have a mental health concern, we're going to be there for you. It's like,
correct.
I'm not planning on having one. Yeah.
Yeah, I hope not to. Now, I'd like to be able to follow a good sign or know I can pick up a phone or someone and get a response. So if the idea is that what we want orientation to do is to drive enrollment, that is, I want a student to believe when they come to visit this campus that I have people and a moment and a place where if I need something, all I have to do is ask, and they will answer whatever that question is and help me find the resources I need. Because the reality is no institution can be all things to every student, but we know where to send students to get other things they need, including all those places right here on campus that are designed to help them. But it changes again. It changes how you think about designing an orientation. And my question is, if there are students that we let enroll without attending an orientation, then we thought it was okay. Or if we do a one-day shortened orientation in August, then obviously it was okay to do that. So if we're just trying to give students choices, that's one thing. Filtering or watering down something we say we value sends, I think, the opposite message from what we want. So those are big conversations you have to have once you start talking about what is it we really value. Is it the education, or is it just the final degree at the end? And, we're hardwired to think that way, right? We think about what are our enrollment numbers, we think about retention, and we think about graduation. And the reality is, to do our jobs and really do it well, it's not just about graduation. And I'm not saying we shouldn't hold ourselves just rigorously accountable, but I mean that what we should be judging ourselves for is the quality of education. And that's a lot harder to put numbers to. And especially when we see so many students who it does take 6 years or 8 years, or even like me, my own educational journey as a student. I was a traditional, high-achieving, first-generation college student. I went as far as I could afford to go for my family, and yet still be close enough that I could drive. I had a terrible first semester because I'd never been away from home, and I had a lot of fun. I pulled it together, and 3.5 years in, I dropped out. It took me 10 years to find my path back to higher ed. 10 years. And it was a totally different experience finding my place 10 years later, just 10 years later. And this is pre the AI internet world we all live in today. So I think that we have to think that way now. It's just a faster clip that we see everything changing.
I've made a decision here today.
I'm going to hang out with you until the end of time.
We're hanging out, Donna. I like what you have to say. So many things are sitting with me, and I'm like, yes. The education or the degree, and our I don't know the right word, the push that we have to measure some ROI right when the student graduates to justify the cost of that degree. I get it. I do. I personally get it. I understand, and I would think that way, and probably will think that way when I tell my kids to absolutely go to college, not to not go to college, right? Because there's this question about, I'm like, yeah, you're going to college. I'm going to roll in my grave if I don't send my kids to college.
And you want to know they're going to finish, right? You want to know you're giving them the best chance to finish.
Yeah, and I need to know that I gave them something and that set them up. And yes, I want them to get a job right after college, and I want every person, an adult and kid, whoever I came across in my 25 years in higher ed, to have gotten that first job. But boy, I hope that fifth one they got, or the fourth one they got because of their education, made them a hell of a lot more money than they made in their first one, and then it was directly related to their degree, even indirectly related, because that is impossible for us to measure. And somehow we've shortened the value of a degree to some right after college measurement. And I just go, if we're talking about education and setting you up for a lifelong learning mindset, that goes beyond that first job too. I know we measure it, and I get it. And I think state institutions, you have to measure it. You have to see that output. But boy, there's other jobs that those people will have in the long run that help them because of the degree.
Higher Ed PodCon is coming. Go to higheredpodcon.com. That's higheredpodcon.com to learn more.
I guess I would propose this. I'll give you an example. At Fitchburg State, when I got here, I was really surprised to learn we, like lots of other state publics in the country, have a housing issue. And it's interesting. We have a housing issue in our region. That is, we do not have enough market rate housing options for the people who live here. Interestingly enough,
way above market rate. You probably have some a lot
that is
100%. Yeah.
100% true, even in a region like North Central Mass. But here's the other thing. Our campuses have too much housing, right? We overbuilt for what our current student population is. And that is true for almost all of us. So what's interesting is we set out, as good academics do, to solve a problem. So it's like, well, what do we do? The problem at that point wasn't enrollment. The problem was we have too much in our housing portfolio. So how do we get more students to live on campus? Well, it's a pretty quick leap to go, well, you got to recruit students who come from other places who will live on campus.
Yep.
So this campus, as an example, redirected our efforts in the region and started focusing on students who were coming from states adjacent to us. Now, I think, and this is just 100% a Donna opinion, but I think we focused on the wrong problem. I think that if we had focused on serving the region and we had focused on what is the value of the education we provide, one, we don't have the same housing problem that we do today. And two, the degrees come. Focus on the actual, the real mission, which is education, the real mission, which is to enroll students so you have the opportunity to provide the education. If you focus on the short term, right, the recruiting students from other places, you're not actually staying on mission. And so we've refocused ourselves at Fitchburg State. How do we serve the region? How do we make sure that Fitchburg State is, in a crowded higher ed marketplace, the first choice option for any student who comes from Massachusetts? You don't have to go far to get this amazing degree. You can go far from Fitchburg State. And that's a very powerful mission and message. And I think that at the end of the day, what we're going to look up and see is that we've got more students living on campus. We have a more vibrant campus experience because of that. And we've already figured out how to do the graduate and online education piece of this very well. So now it's going to be, how do we open our doors to adult learners, to our military and veteran students? How do we ensure that they have options for safely living on campus and feeling like they belong to this very diverse, big community of learners? Because it is. I love the modern learner concept that you shared. That is absolutely it. And it's not just about the digital connections. It's about the human connections. And I think that's what state publics offer, because we can be so agile if we are willing to be bold.
Nailed it.
Yeah, you're so good. You're so good. You say things so well. And, I spoke to a president a while back, and one of the things he talked about was being excellent first. Like, we want to scale. We want more students. But the worst thing we could do is scale early, give a subpar education, and have those stakeholders who graduate, even if they do graduate, say, well, my education wasn't that great. Because then you've got a reputational, a marketing problem. You have to be excellent first, and everything else comes because of that excellence, because you've committed to the learning, right? And that's what you're saying. You're saying we got to be excellent in the region, and then opportunities come.
That is exactly it. If we can't serve our region, what in the world makes us think we can serve two states over? And, I would say I don't want my competition are also my closest partners in this. It's the other state public institutions in Massachusetts. And I think that's healthy. That's how it's supposed to be. That's what we were designed to do originally. I think that I'm not trying to situate Fitchburg State, and I think our people would agree, to compete with the big online powerhouse. I was going to say degree mill, but that's not exactly even what I meant, because they provide an option and an opportunity for a different kind of student who needs a different kind of path and is often seeking knowledge and information, which is, I would just point out, still slightly different from education. Because what we offer here, and what our state publics do so well, is offer this full body experience, this education, where you do have an opportunity at whatever rate is reasonable for you to immerse yourself in the fun, the joy, the excitement of learning. And it means not just in the classroom, but it means if you're a student athlete, it means on the field, on the court, on the rink. If you're an adult learner, it means engaging with people and talking after classes about these big ideas. We sometimes mistake. I remember teaching early years and sitting with a group of writing professors, and we're all just, you always get these papers. This is back in the days when we taught the mode, so everyone wrote a persuasive paper and a compare, contrast, and so on. And so we had, at that point, you're like, I've read every kind of paper. I've read about the death penalty, abortion, illegal immigration, any of the hot topic items. We have read this essay. And the conversation that I had with this group of new faculty, it was, you've read it 100 times. I've read it 100 times. I've read it 100 times this semester, but it might be the first time our students have ever written it. And the key is, for the traditional learner, for the 18-year-old who is straight out of high school and seeking that very traditional 1982 John Hughes sort of college campus experience, there is also a 52-year-old who has never had an opportunity to put pen to paper and think about what it is they believe or they can prove about those topics that we are all very used to dealing with. That is the transformation that higher ed can provide. And that is the full educational experience. And that is who we're competing with. It's every other opportunity a student has to get an education, which we get that in the workplace. Sometimes we get it with our families. But we provide the education with the information, with the power of knowledge. And that's something, the big online institutions can't compete with.
Well, I'd like to bring you back for a subscriber-only episode, and I'm going to ask you about leadership and about what you think for the future of higher ed in that mini episode. But in this main portion, I like open mics, Donna, and I want to give you one. Open microphone. Tell us anything else about Fitchburg State University that we should know, anything on your mind about higher education, anything at all, in any direction you want to take it. Leave us with some final thoughts.
This is a small campus on the go. We are full of possibilities. We have the amazing, opportunity to be part of the state of Massachusetts, which is well known for providing a superior education. It is literally the stuff of movies that people see all over the world. What we provide in Fitchburg is a full wraparound experience on a campus that has been here for 130 years, the red brick, the ivy on the bricks, but the modern, forward-thinking technology, and faculty and librarians and staff who are so incredibly dedicated to the mission of this institution, which is to provide an education to every single person who wants that experience and is willing to do the work. And that is an amazing everyday thing at Fitchburg State. We are on a path, we say often, to not just say we're the number one state institution in Massachusetts, but to actually be the number one state university. And I think the way we do that is we focus on the experience all students have on our campus and providing, as you said, that excellent education first and foremost. That's what we spend our time on, taking care of our people so they can then take care of our students. And that's how we fix the problems that we might face today, and definitely the ones that are coming tomorrow.
I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the fact that you were also the first woman president in the history of the institution in the 132 years, I think, if I heard you say it. Congratulations.
That is true.
And
Thank you.
It's funny how my mind works, because yesterday I was doing a presentation at a conference and I saw the first female president that I ever interviewed on the Edda podcast 5 years ago. And it took us 30 episodes to get to a point where we had a woman come on, because we just there weren't as many. Let's just put it plainly. There weren't as many women that in higher education, the highest levels of leadership. So every time I get an opportunity to bring someone on in the highest role who's broken the glass, and I just appreciate it so much, and having your voice here, and thank you.
Joe, thank you. I appreciate it. There's a lot of work still to be done, and having the honor of being the first means I won't be the last. So I appreciate it.
Like that. You say good stuff, Donna. You say good stuff. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to let Dr. Hodge go, and we're going to bring her back for a subscriber-only episode. Of course, you know how to subscribe. Go to theedupexperience.com. Ladies and gentlemen, there she is. She's Dr. Donna Hodge. She is president of Fitchburg State University. And you just upped. Okay, everybody, we're back with Donna for a quick subscriber-only episode. Donna, sort of building on the fact that you're the first female president, you come into a time in by the way, this is just off the cuff. I was in Colorado at the same time you were back in the day. I lived in Colorado from, 2000 till 2017. So we were probably in and around the same circles of higher ed at that time.
Oh, yeah. If you watch the serendipity map, our paths crossed. We were in downtown
crossed.
Denver. You were here. I was there. Yeah. Yeah.
But it's interesting where people end up. It's interesting how we end up in these roles. And we have a very small community in higher education. And so you step into this role. You're the first female president. That comes, I think, with, I don't know if it's pressure. You'd have to tell me. I don't know, obviously. Is it pressure? Is it a motivation to really kill it, to sort of show left your mark? Tell us about your leadership philosophy right now in higher education. How do you lead? Has that changed recently? All of that together. Talk about your impact and where you want to leave the institution. A lot of questions in there, whatever one you want to answer.
I have a lived experience that shapes what I believe and how I think I interact with other people. And it starts from my own college experience, which was not unusual. It's not unusual today. It certainly wasn't in the 80s and early 90s. But I never forget that I left that first college campus and I was so close to that degree, right? And I had gotten the beginnings of a really good education. A lot of who I am today was shaped in those 3.5 years, but I didn't finish. And no one asked where I went. Pre the technology that we have today, it wasn't as simple. You had to know where a student left to go to. You had to have a phone number. You had to have a physical address, and you had to hope they were still there when whatever piece of mail caught up to them. And then you needed them to respond. Why did you leave this campus? Fill out a card. I don't know that ever even happened, of course. But the point is, they wouldn't have found me that easily. I lost my father at that time. I always said I would go back to school. And I looked up and it was 10 years later and I was no closer to that degree. When I came back to school 10 years later, it was to start over completely, to reshape my life. That happens every day at Fitchburg State. We interact with a student who's here because they need to reshape their life, or they want to, or they just woke up on a Tuesday and decided all things are possible. And to really live that, I got to go find other people who likewise believe it. So all things are possible. Where do I go to find the coalition of the willing, the people who will help me achieve those dreams? And so I've got a coalition of the willing here. I've got a lot of people who believe like I do. I think that's incredibly important. Find your team, find the people. Hopefully they're not the people who just agree with the things that you say, but they're the people who believe doggedly in the mission of your institution and who know how hard it is to do this work, but how meaningful it is when you do it well. And I think that's what I have at Fitchburg State. This is what this campus had way before I showed up. And that's thanks to the 11 people who came before me. Is there added pressure being the first? Always. I mean, just this weekend, I was introduced to an alum by someone I've met many times and have gotten to know pretty well. And I was introduced, this is the new president at Fitchburg State, Donna Hodge. And I say hello, and we exchange pleasantries. And they said, oh, this is her husband, Dustin. And they went, oh my God. And they shook, I'm doing this because my husband's taller than me. So they shook Dustin's hand, like, oh, it is so great to meet you, President Hodge.
Yikes.
And yeah. And, it's, people never do that out of malice. It is just a reminder that we are at this moment where so much is changing, and to respect the change that is coming, or that is, it means changing the ways we are all kind of hardwired at this point. And so remembering that people who don't look the way you think they should look can be things you can't even imagine. And so I've encountered that a lot. I guarantee, there are things that I've worried about sitting in this chair in this office that the previous 11 didn't have to. And some of them are just because 2025 is very, very different than even 2016 was. So, yeah, I'm going to be, the first presidential portrait in our president's hall with red lipstick, right? These are the small things. Like, someone will need to, check my teeth before we start this process.
A black and white picture with red lipstick. That's the way to go, right? On the
there
wall.
You go. That is it.
What's funny about that is probably that alum. You feel like you could over leverage them and say, look, since you got that wrong, you have to donate an extra $500,000. If you had gotten it right, it was only $500,000, but now it's $1 million.
We are connected for life. That is for sure. That's it was a woman who's broken some barriers herself. Yeah. It's just a good reminder, like, society creates a lot of expectations, and there are lots of socially constructed realities in our world, and so you got to push on those a little bit, and it takes a lot of intentionality. That's true for higher ed too, right? How do we start our conversation today? It was like, what is it that we believe our future can be? Are we managing decline, or are we designing for a great, big, beautiful future? And if you believe you're managing decline, or you believe people can't change, and recognize that a woman, a person of color, someone who looks nothing like you could do the same thing you're doing, or do something else, it's a limited way of thinking. So it is a mindset, but I think it's more active than mindset. One of the things about mindset is it suggests a static state. And I think growth, when we talk about mindset, is always that word we put in there. You want a growth mindset. So I think it's really about thinking and growing in other ways too. So
you talked about future. Last question for you. Talk about what you see for the future of the industry. What's the future of higher education look like?
I think we are going to be forced to rethink our position on degrees. I think that what people want is to get skills and knowledge and new information, to have that educational experience, and the value that we place on that. If we can really get serious about talking through what return on investment is, it is going to be for more and more people. It always has been, to some degree, getting the job. And the way you got the job before is you finished the degree, you had a network, you got the job. It's not so simple anymore, right? So as we are willing and able to reshape programs and structures, infrastructure, most importantly, to stop putting all the emphasis on the degree, and instead think about what's the real outcome we are going for. It's not the degree. The degree has no value. You can hire the most amazing student with a 4.0 and the shiny new degree, and if they didn't really learn anything, if they didn't have that great experience, they're not going to be the best employee. What you want is the student who has a growth mindset, who is willing to think and to change what they believe about the world. And so how are we going to value that? I think that's the future of higher ed. I think we hate conversations around credit hours and what credit hours equal what degree. It gives us all, a little bit of heartburn in higher ed right now. But the reality is those pressures are already here. People want in the UK, in Germany, we don't think about a 120 credit hour degree. They use different systems, of course, but it's closer to a 90 degree diploma. And that is an uncomfortable conversation for us to have in higher ed because we are driven by enrollment and money. But the fact is what we should be driven by is education. So we've got to start to shift that way we prioritize, which means shifting what our broader community thinks the return on investment is, which means we've got to get back to thinking about education. And it's not about the degree, it's about the experience.
And there, everyone, is why we do this podcast, because we get a picture into the future of how today's leaders are thinking about the industry and how we can work together to change it. I really enjoyed this conversation. I hope you did too, audience. I hope you enjoyed it, Donna, more than the rest of us, that you had fun.
It was awesome.
There she is, everyone. Absolute pleasure and honor to have you here. Dr. Donna Hodge, president at Fitchburg State University. You just upped.
Did you buy your tickets yet? Higher Education's first podcast conference is coming July 12th. Go to higheredpodcon.com, higheredpodcon.com. Get your tickets.